The GOAT debate. One as old as whenever YouTubers discovered it was a profitable video topic, but one aspect of the GOAT debate are the prime forms of various players. So who had the greatest prime? Well, in Fortnite, 8-player primes could be in contention for the greatest of all time. Starting in chronological order, there is Tfue, whose prime is generally placed around a period of time from September of 2018 to April of 2019. Tfue was truly the first person to dominate Fortnite competitive. There were other faces who certainly gave him a run for his money, but in the fall skirmish, there was no question that Tfue was the best. He won 3 out of the 6 weeks in the fall skirmish, 2 of which being solo tournaments. He even won one of them while he was sick with the flu, giving himself the nickname of Tfue. And to end off his fall skirmish, he won the week 6 TwitchCon LAN with Cloaksy in a dominant fashion, 5 points ahead of second, which keep in mind, formats in the early days gave a lot less points, so 5 points was a lot. Tfue would continue this dominance into early 2019, getting a 3rd and 7th in the secret skirmish duos and solos respectively, and going into the World Cup qualifiers, many questioned whether Tfue could still keep up with the newer generation, but he silenced all of that doubt by winning week 3 and qualifying with ease, even getting more points than 2nd place Ziff, who had his friends feed him kills for extra points. However, Tfue's insane aim only took him so far and he had a disappointing World Cup performance, and after that, he settled down and just became an average pro from there on out. But there is no denying that Prime Tfue was a force to be reckoned with. And speaking of the up and coming new generation of Fortnite pros, there was Bugha. While Bugha had insane longevity and high points in his career such as his late 2021 FNCS 3-peat, there is no denying that Prime Bugha was in the first half of 2019. From March to August, Bugha was so far ahead of the competition. Of course, everyone knows about his insane World Cup performance, where he nearly doubled the points to 2nd place and only had 1 bad game out of 6. But even before the World Cup, it was clear that Bugha was something special. His mechanics and game sense were far ahead of its time. At the time of the World Cup qualifiers, players like Clix were considered the greatest mechanical players in the game. Meanwhile, Bugha was out there beating Clix 12-2 in playground 1v1s while not even breaking a sweat, truly showing how far ahead his mechanics were for the time. This could have easily been the undefeated best prime in history, but due to poor placements in the first few FNCS tournaments of Fortnite, many began to doubt Bugha's ability, meaning the debate continued on. During Bugha's prime, other players also rose up with insane primes of their own, such as Stompy. From April of 2019 to August of 2019, Stompy had what is to this day one of the most underrated primes in all Fortnite history. Stompy qualified for the World Cup 7 separate times, and it would have been 8 had his PC not crashed in the week 9 solo qualifier. While he didn't do too well when it came time for the World Cup, he still performed decently enough. But then he redeemed himself by winning the first ever FNCS on EU, and throughout the FNCS qualifiers, Stompy and his trio were really the only people on EU who could keep up with the famous MMB trio. And speaking of Stompy and his trio, there was Aqua, whose prime lasted for about a year from June of 2019 to June of 2020. Aqua started off of course by winning the World Cup Duos LAN, and then 3 days after the World Cup ended, Aqua dropped his duo Nyrox, and at the time this perplexed everyone. But once he announced his new trio with Stompy and Shinken, it became clear why he dropped Nyrox. While Nyrox was good, it was clear that Aqua was pulling most of the weight of that duo. Being able to win the Duo World Cup while having a teammate you don't even really like playing with is insane. Of course, as he mentioned before, Aqua won Trio FNCS on EU, being the only other trio that consistently hung at the top with MMB. While he didn't really play the next FNCS, he came back at the start of 2020 with a strong 4th place in the Duo FNCS, famously conditioning high ground with the Grotto minigun, and to cap off his prime, he placed 3rd in the Invitational Solos just a month later. While his accomplishments are similar to Stompy's, what differentiates Aqua is the reason he quit. Aqua periodically took breaks from Fortnite due to hand injuries from overuse. Had Aqua been able to play out the full duration of his prime and not be held back by injuries, there is no question he would have a much stronger case for the best prime in Fortnite history, and hopefully, this video has presented a strong case as to why you guys should like and subscribe. No pressure though. With how open tournaments were, the floor was wide open for up-and-comers, and in August, Unknown Army would begin one of the most dominant primes in Fortnite history. Of the 17 Cash Cups held from the start of Season X to the end of Chapter 2 Season 1, Unknown won 6 of them. In Chapter 2 Season 1, Unknown was the only player to win more than a single Cash Cup in the entire season. In Squad FNCS, Unknown not only won, but pretty much carried his entire team. While other squads were made up of some of the most decorated pros in history, Unknown's team were generally disregarded as none of them were really that accomplished. And as little disrespect as possible, but the community was kind of right. Ronaldo was a decent IGL, but really nowhere near the skill of a top pro, and Kez literally installed aim cheats because of how hard he fell off after Unknown carried him. But besides the placements, there was just something different about Unknown. He was an unstoppable fighter. His building and piece control were way ahead of its time, and aim assist jokes aside, his aim was genuinely top tier. Nobody stood a chance in a 1v1 against Prime Unknown, which is why he ran through Cash Cup lobbies like nothing. It's why his entire team's FNCS strategy just focused on keeping Unknown alive, but strangely, Unknown fell off very fast. After December of 2019, he saw a sharp decline in placements, and that insane upper hand he had on everyone fighting-wise almost vanished. Some blame it on legacy aim assist being nerfed, but linear aim assist was just as broken, with players like Scoped and AV tearing it up in early 2020. So while Unknown's prime was short-lived, there is no denying that it was one of the best. After the era of Unknown, there was the rise of Tayson. From June of 2020 to December of 2021, there was no question that Tayson was the best player to ever touch Fortnite. In the 3 solo FNCS tournaments held within that time span, Tayson placed 5th, 1st, and 1st. And while he was an amazing solo player, what truly cemented Tayson's prime as one of the best in history was the insane diversity in his teammates. In the 6 trio FNCS tournaments he played in this time span, he played with 5 different trios, and he placed well with almost all of them. This included a first with Mongrel and Mero, a third with 4ZR and Nate, a fifth with Vino and Reason, and another first with Hen and Chapix. There is no question about it that Prime Tayson was the best online player of all time. But one thing that has always held Tayson back is his LAN performances. Tayson has never had a good LAN performance, hence why his prime ends after December of 2021. After Grand Royale, Tayson just sort of lost that air he once had. Players no longer respected him, and he began to get contested in FNCS a lot more. While Tayson was on his downturn, Mero was rapidly coming up. From September of 2021 to September of 2022, Mero was in his prime and easily the most dominant player on NA. After a disappointing FNCS with Day in Reverse, Mero would split off from them and play with Bugha, and this is where Bugha's aforementioned three-peat happened. And in the following 2 FNCS tournaments, they placed 3rd and 2nd, meaning that in the span of a year, over 5 different FNCS tournaments, Bugha and Mero averaged a placement of 1.6. But what distinctly separates Mero's prime really just comes down to the eye test. It was clear that in all these tournaments, Mero was the deciding factor. While he wasn't necessarily carrying his team like Unknown years prior, Mero was clearly the best player in the trio, and without him, none of these placements would have ever happened. He was simply on another level for his time. Unfortunately, a poor LAN performance demotivated him and put a quick end to his prime. While he did famously come back a year later to win the 2023 Invitational, there is no denying that the three-peat was his true prime. For about the span of a year and a half from the end of Mero's prime, no one player really dominated Fortnite. That was until Peterbot and Poya went on the most insane run of all time in 2024. Due to the recency of it, I'm sure most of you know the details. 2nd, 1st, and 1st in the 3 regional FNCS tournaments they played, and at the 2024 LAN, people were so scared of Peterbot that they just let him have the entire right side of the raft to himself. Right now, both players are still running through the NA region with no signs of stopping, likely making this the greatest player prime in history. However, it would be a disservice to not include some honorable mentions. Similar to pre-World Cup Bugha, Zexro was just on another level when it came to the early days of Fortnite. While he didn't have the most insane placements, he single-handedly pioneered the W key meta as far back as the 2018 Winter Royale. Unfortunately, tendinitis and wrist injuries took him out early. Keeping with early competitive GOATs is Bizzle. Bizzle was sort of a more consistent version of Tfue, lower peaks, but a much higher floor. In every single LAN from PAX West 2018 to ESL Katowice, Bizzle was never outside of the top 4. And finally is Mongrel, who brought about a revolution in how Fortnite was played. He was one of the first to really push the limits of mechanics in Fortnite, and of course had some great placements along the way, but I don't think he truly dominated like Unknown or Peterbot did. So that is where I leave it to you. Who do you think had the best prime in Fortnite history? Comment below. If you enjoyed this video, then check out my second channel linked below, or the other videos on your screen now.